And bibbity bobbity boo, here we are. It's Friday morning. It's June 14th, Flag Day. Hope everybody's having a great start to the morning already. It's a beautiful day up here on Lake Wissota. This is Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow. It's our first ever Coffee Cup Friday. So we have to bring something different to the table. So, of course, this one only has the logo on the left side. So then I have to bring it around to show it's my Eau Claire alumni mug over here. Okay, put it back over there. This is going to be awkward all morning. What do we have today? A show. Oh, yes, we have a show that we're going to be bringing you. We're going to be talking to Keya Vakil. We'll talk about the Supreme Court's mifepristone ruling yesterday, but do not mistake the meaning of that ruling. Yes, mifepristone remains available, but for now, and we'll explain that coming up in a bit. Also, we'll talk to Mark Jacob about media coverage, including his new column that divides political media into three distinct categories: the ruthless, the truthless, and worst of all, in my mind, the toothless. And we'll look to talk to US Attorney Jim Santelle, meteorologist Brittany Merlot, and so much more. Greg Bach will be here as well, coming up in just over 4 minutes here on the Civic Media Radio Network, right after news and further preparations. My favorite news cliche: preparations are underway, so we must continue. We'll see you soon. All right, here we go.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It's 6:06 on this Friday. Made it to Friday, June 14th, 2024. It's another beautiful day to have you here up north. Live from Lake Wissota, from wherever you're listening across the Civic Media Radio Network, or through the Civic Media app, or watching us on social media, or catching us later by podcast. I got a question for you. Have you been to your local dairy breakfast yet as part of June Dairy Month? And if not, what's holding you back? Maybe it just hasn't happened yet. Like some people that we're going to talk about in just a minute here. Anyway, Greg kind of looks up, like pops out, like, what? Talking about me. 855-75-CIVIC is the number here, 855-75-CIVIC. Call it, text it. Speaking of texting, get that Civic Media app ready for one more time, the Scotty Summer Text to Win contest coming up an hour from now, where you could win Brewers tickets, you could win a Wisconsin Dells prize pack, and every entry, whether you win a daily or an hourly prize or not, is entered for the big grand prize giveaway, your choice of some great options for a staycation. Coming up a little later this hour, Courier Newsroom national correspondent Keya Vakil talks about the Supreme Court mifepristone ruling yesterday. The so-called abortion pill ruling is a victory for now, but as we saw in a Supreme Court ruling on a different issue yesterday, this could just be a head fake, and this may not be the last time the Supremes weigh in on matters relating to women's reproductive health. In our second hour, we'll talk to Mark Jacob. He has his usual review of this week's media coverage of big stories and talks about his column that this week divides political media into three distinct categories: the ruthless, the truthless, and, in my mind, the most sinful, the toothless. Plus, we'll have Dan Schumacher talking sports, former US Attorney Jim Santelle, meteorologist Brittany Merlot, and so much more ahead on this Friday morning. First, we'll tell you about temperatures around the state. By and large, about 10 degrees cooler than yesterday, though yesterday we were just past some thunderstorms, had some humidity and everything else. It's 54 here in Chippewa Falls, 47 in Hayward with some patchy fog. Park Falls 51, Wausau 54, Green Bay reporting 61 degrees, La Crosse 57, Wisconsin Rapids 54, Oshkosh 61, Madison's at 56 degrees, and it's 55 in Waukesha, where we find the aforementioned Greg Bach in his Lakefront Brewery t-shirt, ready to get his week started. Mr. Bach, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Pat Brightlow. I'm doing well.
All right. You can answer the question off the top because...
A negative. That's my blood type.
Well, you can answer this in the negative because we asked you a couple weeks back if you'd ever attended a dairy breakfast.
Not only, Pat, have I never attended a dairy breakfast, and I feel like a terrible Wisconsin boy, born and raised here my entire life, I had never heard of a dairy breakfast until we spoke about it.
Gasp. But
gasp indeed.
But
what?
We can fix that.
How?
And I'll tell you in just a moment. But before I forget, I'm going off on a tangent already because I'll forget otherwise. What new show idea did you come up with last week besides Yacht Rock Fridays? What else are we doing on Fridays now?
Oh, today, Coffee Cup Friday.
Coffee Cup Friday. So I brought the most awkward cup in my collection, which is just a UW Eau Claire alumni one. Yeah. But unlike a lot of coffee mugs where there's something on both sides, it's only on the one side, and only if you can only see it if you're drinking out of your left hand. Now, if I had the cup over to drink out of my left hand, I would constantly, hit is that annoying you yet?
Doing that.
Yeah. It would constantly hit the mic. So that's the only time you're going to see the UW Eau Claire logo as I revert back over to my right hand. So what did you bring for show and tell today, Mr. Bach?
Well, what I'm drinking out right now, I actually brought two because one of them is really fun. I'll bring it out later. This is an over large
and
mug.
overly full. It's a very generous
and actually
pour there.
the joke is on the front too, so I can't.
You too can't. Yeah, I can't see that.
It looks like so it's the color of a pill bottle, that orangish color of a prescription pill bottle. It says prescription coffee. Take one mug by month as needed, repeated until fully awake and alert. Warning, do not interact with others until desired effects are felt. Refills unlimited, expires when the mug is empty. It was a white elephant Christmas present that someone gave me, and they were like, I didn't know what to get you. I'm like, thanks, that hurts.
It was nice of them to get you something in case you don't have a morning newspaper to read. There's a lot to read off of that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So there we go. So we've got our little Coffee Cup Friday, which again, if you would like to send us a photo, we wouldn't mind putting it up on social media. So either put it in the Facebook comments or text it to us at 855-75-CIVIC. So getting back to the dairy breakfast, are you in luck? Because not in luck, that's over in Polk County, but are you ever fortunate to know that where you live in Kenosha County and commute to Waukesha, which again, wow, kudos to you. But the Kenosha County Dairy Breakfast is this weekend, tomorrow. You had to do math really quick. Tomorrow, presented by the Kenosha County Dairy Promotion at the Crane Grain Farms on 288th Avenue in Union Grove. Starts at 6:30, runs until 10:30. Something for the whole family, big farm breakfast, a vendor tent with items to purchase, children's games, an education tent, farm toys for sale, and much more. The breakfast includes scrambled eggs with ham and cheese, pancakes, yogurt, juice, ice cream. Tickets available at the event only. Parking will be available at the farm along with off-site parking because these things get really, really popular and really big. I hope I've intrigued you to consider stopping by over the weekend at your first ever dairy breakfast.
So yes, I am intrigued, but I have a question for you because the big thing for me is the whole parking issue.
Yes.
They're very lovely. They offer there's parking at the farm. There's off-site parking with school bus transportation to and from the farm.
Which is weird because usually the off-site transportation at the dairy breakfast I've been to, you're sitting in a tractor wagon.
See, that'd be cool.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe there'll be one out there, but maybe it's so popular they need a school bus to get you there. So
they do. They're offering school bus transportation from 3 separate locations. And my only question is, no offense to anybody out there, I don't really want to drive to another location to be driven to the breakfast. So is it best if I just get there by like 6:30, 7 o'clock?
Oh, absolutely. Now look, there's going to be a crowd from the beginning because there's a lot of early risers out there in farm country. But it's going to be, I've never been to that one, but it's pretty safe to say it's going to be at its craziest from 8 o'clock onward. Okay. And so yes, early is good. Early is your friend for something like this.
Okay. So I'm gonna make a plan to be there. I want to park at the farm.
But did you notice, read a little further down, another way to get there is the Derriere Community Bike Ride. It will launch from Bristol Woods Park in Bristol at 7 a.m., follow a planned route. 13 miles there and 13 miles, it's a 26-mile round trip bike ride to a dairy breakfast. You'll work it off. Another option for you to think about there, Greg. Okay, he's done thinking about it. He's not going to do it, but hey, at least I threw it out there for you.
Oh, darn. I don't have a bike.
Well, at least now you know that maybe next year.
Yeah. And so if I can make it, if I can get there in the early morning, if I can get there in time and whatnot and all the good things, I will go. I'll enjoy some breakfast. I will take pictures.
Good.
And I will report back.
And we'll read any note from you on Monday because you'll be off. I'll be very intrigued to hear all about it. Hear about your travels, which hopefully aren't as dramatic as the travels of Jane Matnair and Todd Alba had getting from Eau Claire to Amory yesterday. And I'm going to save any details that Jane and Todd want to share. I'll leave to them. Just suffice to say, VRBO is a perfectly good service in many cases, many times, but there are different ways in which it might not work. And they're not all the fault of any given party. I'm just saying sometimes things happen. And Todd and Jane were supposed to come up to the Kreitlow compound here and maybe go for a little pontoon ride. And they're like a half hour later than expected, an hour later than expected, hour and a half later than expected. I'm like, wow, they must have really gotten, trapped by autograph seekers in Eau Claire. And finally I hear from Todd, and I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but the phone call went something like, "Oh, I just can't believe this happened. There's just no way. This is the worst thing. We're going to Amory right now." I'm like, it's okay, Todd. It's okay. You go there. So I hope Todd, I know he did, because I saw a photo on social media. They found some peaceful, tranquil settings there in Amory. Yeah. But road trips are not always easy. And
you got to expect the unexpected.
Yeah. Well,
and
nobody
what comes with you.
Yeah.
Nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition.
I was going to go there, and I just wasn't sure where our age group was today. But yeah, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. And so I'm going to be making the drive up to Amory as well, and joining them. And I don't have the location in front of me, or I'd invite folks in Amory to stop by. Although, again, if you're in the Amory area, if you haven't heard already that celebrities like Jane Matenaer and Todd Alba are coming by, I mean, you're just not, in the loop there. So they'll be doing their shows 10 to noon and noon to 2. So come on by if you're in the Amory area. We'll find out which of them came out to be the winner in the Scotty Summer Text to Win contest, because they were having a competition over who could get more listeners to text in their keywords, and the loser has to buy a steak dinner tonight at a supper club up in the Amory area. So we'll get the results of that as well. So a lot to look forward on this very beautiful morning. The Brewers were off yesterday. They are back in action tonight. Freddie Peralta on the mound for a 3-game series against the Cincinnati Reds. I probably should get you a first pitch on that. I'm sure it's 6:35, and I'm sure you'll find it on several Civic Media radio stations. Head to civicmedia.us.
I have the location if you want to be in Amory.
Oh, sure. Yes,
it's
please.
It looks like the Danielson stage at Michael Park.
Okay.
Yep. That's going to be in Amory today.
Good. All right. Well, come on by there, because we had a nice little turnout at Shift Cyclery in Eau Claire yesterday, and we'd love to see you come on by and visit Jane's show and Todd's show as well. Nice way to kind of launch into the weekend here. So we'll talk more about what we can unpack from today's news. We'll meet with Keya Vakil, Courier Newsroom national correspondent out there in California. So we're going to ask him off the top if there have been any Eric Hovde sightings lately while he's been there. And yes, we'll get into what President Trump said yesterday about a Wisconsin city that he called horrible. And then some folks denied he said it. Some said, oh, he meant this. Some say he meant that. We'll see if anybody can keep their story straight. Coming up next on Up North News Radio, live from Chippewa Falls on the Civic Media Radio Network. Well, yeah, of course we said it was going to be Coffee Cup Friday, but you didn't think we'd forget about Yacht Rock Friday, did ya? Of course not. Little Stephen Bishop to kick things off on this Friday morning. And again, Scotty Summer Text to Win contest at 7:07. Greg, where were you when the big news hit yesterday?
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a shock to hear that Donald Trump in a private meeting with House Republicans referred to Milwaukee as a horrible city. So shocking that Donald Trump and other Republicans would trash the city of Milwaukee. I was stunned. I had to clutch my pearls for a moment, but I regrouped and carried on. But surely it must have been just as shocking for you to hear Donald Trump disparage Wisconsin's largest city.
Well, luckily, Pat, I had a 19th century fainting chair next to me. I placed my hand upon my forehead and said, "Oh my Lord!" And I woke up this morning in the studio. That's the last thing I remember. And it was so shocking and so unbecoming of a man known for beautiful words, poetic words, really. He's
poetry,
like,
really. Yes.
Prose, he walks through like a tulip field in the wastelands. And there's already a billboard in Milwaukee with the quote.
I loved, yes, because now these billboards are digital. They're basically big TVs, and yes, there are billboards all over with Trump's face saying, quote, "Milwaukee, where we are having our convention, is a horrible city." First reported by Punchbowl News because, again, a private meeting with members of Congress, meeting with a former president, ain't no such thing. There were people in the room who were, texting and sending messages out, which were quickly being put up on Twitter. And look, the whole Milwaukee is a horrible city comment, that in and alone of itself would have been a story, and we would have, mentioned it and eventually would have moved on. Yeah. But compounding that was the Keystone Cops mentality set up by Wisconsin's congressional Republicans. It would be one thing if they all had the same story, but you had Derek Van Orden right away saying, "Oh, it was about the crime. The crime is terrible in Milwaukee." And you had Scott Fitzgerald say he was talking about the elections. The elections are horrible in Milwaukee. And you have Brian Stile saying, he didn't say it at all. What are you talking about? He didn't say it was. So they couldn't keep their story straight on that. And of course, I love the joke that somebody else put on social media was Eric Hovde's reaction was, "What is this Milwaukee of which you speak? Is that in Wisconsin?"
Yeah, you in California. I mean, the thing is that the people, I understand the congressional, I understand the diplomatic / political way of trying to defend it, whatever, but like, he didn't say anything that his supporters don't agree with. They don't like the city. They hate it there. They think crime was invented in Milwaukee, just like anyone in Illinois thinks crime was invented in Chicago. So the fact that he called it horrible, like, of course he thinks Milwaukee is horrible. Of course he thinks that. He would never. And that was, I can't remember who I was talking to. I was like, it's like, did you expect me to say something to the effect of like, "Milwaukee, what a beautiful, lovely place full of wonderful, diverse people, businesses, a wonderful lakefront"? No, he's never going to say that.
No. And that was, look, when we first heard that they were putting the convention in Milwaukee, I said from the get-go that they were doing this to say, can you look at this hellhole where we are? Look around us, because they would pick on any given thing, because, crime won't be zero. It's a city. You put that many people, closely packed, and you'll point to any one thing and go, "See?" And that's what they do, is they exploit crime. Derek Van Orden, of course, had to do it with crude language and attacking the media, basically giving up the game and crudely confirming the whole reason they're coming to Milwaukee is to talk about crime as a way to appeal to a certain part of their base. At least that seems about right to me, and just the inability of all of them to huddle up and go, "Okay, what's our story on this?" When maybe what the story could have been was, well, we're not really happy the president said, yes, he did say it. We're not happy about it. And we look forward to, showing off our best side here in Wisconsin. They could not conjure up the human decency to say that. It was right away CYA mode.
Okay, so like I said, President Trump said those words. Not shocking at all. The news story that would have come out had a Tom Tiffany or a Derek Van Orden or a Brian Stile, who people would like, Brian who, would have said, no, while there's a great many things we agree with, Milwaukee, our biggest city, is a great asset, a great blah. If they would have come out and defended Milwaukee just in a purely political way, milk toast,
Yeah.
that would have been the headline. Derek Van Orton disagrees with President Trump. Tom Tiffany bashes President Trump's comments on Milwaukee. They cannot do that. They're not allowed. They would face so much backlash from so many people,
which is just sad. And
yeah,
there was actually a member of Congress yesterday, I don't know the name, somebody from another state, who introduced a bill to name the oceans after President Trump, basically, that the coastal waters of the United States would be called the Donald John Trump Economic Enterprise Zone or something. I mean, they're working so hard to, kiss his feet that they're willing to rename the oceans for Trump. But this only brings to mind something that was on the show yesterday with our friend Joe Zepecki. Wisconsin is a key state. It is a battleground state. I mean, every vote counts. And in normal times, a senator from a battleground state would be on anybody's short list of potential running mates. And yet, after Trump made the comment, I thought about what Joe Zepecki said. And I mean, again, it would be even more vital that somebody in Trump world would say, hey, why don't we put Ron Johnson on the list? He's won 3 elections, always against the odds. So, we're going to need every vote that we can. And yet Ron Johnson's not even in the rumor mill about being a running mate. Instead of putting rich white Republican business guy, Ron Johnson on the ticket, we're going to put rich white Republican business guy Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, on the ticket. What's he doing on the short list? As opposed to anybody from Wisconsin. But he already had his split with Paul Ryan. He's only got 40 former cabinet officers who say they're not going to support him. But you think he could find somebody from Wisconsin? Glenn Grothman, Derek Van Orden. There it is. Derek Van Orden should be Donald Trump's running mate.
I think that Ron Johnson's actually a great pick because he would just for the complicity that Mike Pence had, which was more like just a sleepy complicity to get that Christian vote. Mm-hmm. Ron Johnson would do anything, say anything to support him. Period.
He would. And instead,
we keep him from having to work and know things.
Instead, as I noted on social media, I mean, they are keeping Uncle Ron locked in the attic where he can continue to mumble angrily about Burisma and ivermectin and how Greenland was once green, or something like that. The guy's got enough of a record that he's not even in the rumor mill to be VP. But, again, we won't have Paul Ryan as a running mate anymore for reasons that Keya Vakil is going to explain to us in just a moment. And we'll talk as well about yesterday's Supreme Court decision on mifepristone. There was another ruling on labor rights, or the lack thereof, for people trying to unionize at Starbucks. All of that, plus still your chance to win one more time here this morning on our Scotty Summer Text to Win contest. Wherever you're listening across Wisconsin on this beautiful Friday morning, when you're here, you're up north. We'll be right back. Save it for a rainy day. back on this Friday morning, this Yacht Rock Friday morning. Keya Vakil is here from LA, political correspondent for Courier Newsroom. Got to ask you first, while you're out there on the left coast, any Eric Hovde sightings since last weekend? Have you been scouring the beaches looking for the Senate candidate for Wisconsin?
No.
He gazes out his window. Nope, nothing.
I have not seen Eric Hovde. He was about 60 miles from me. So not quite in my neighborhood, not quite the pay grade I'm accustomed to hanging out with. So
You're not making Laguna Beach money? Okay.
No, I'm not making Laguna Beach money. I don't know that any reporter is, but Eric Hovde clearly is.
I tell you, if there's anything happening in Orange County, and we ever get reason where you're the reporter who gets an interview with them before anybody with Wisconsin connections Up North News, that would be huge. That they might actually have to pay you Laguna Beach money if you get that. So
yeah, I mean, look, I think the Senate needs to be reformed to give California more than 2 senators, considering how
there
big
it is.
But
there it is.
Eric
Yes.
Hovde should be the senator, and I don't know that we should take a senator from Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wyoming, maybe, if anything else.
Exactly.
But look, you do pay attention to not just national politics, but it's Wisconsin connections as well. And when Paul Ryan said what he said earlier this week on Fox News, and trying to call out Donald Trump and essentially saying he's the one who's not a real Republican. I mean, you had an observation on that this week that I thought was worth sharing, in saying in so many words, former Congressman, former Speaker Ryan, you had your chance.
Yeah, I mean, the reason the Republican Party has morphed into, the Trump Party is because Republicans like Paul Ryan spent, the better part of 40 years just gutting everyone's social safety net, gutting cohesion in this country, and just taking a blowtorch to institutions and regulations, leaving middle class and working class families poorer than they were 40 years ago. And so, Paul Ryan pretty much only cares about tax cuts for the rich and gutting social programs for the poor, working and middle classes. And so there's no constituency for that anymore. Trump, I don't like to give him credit, but he saw what was happening before any other major Republican did, and he capitalized on it. He saw that, this sort of neoconservative policy trickle down that started with Reagan was a disaster and was not helping anyone. And he ran a very different kind of campaign, let's say. And, Paul Ryan left for a reason. He knew he was not going to have any future in the current Republican Party.
Which is odd because, I mean, he and Trump both stand for the same thing. Paul Ryan just tried to get his, billionaire tax cuts through with a bit more polish, and he thinks Trump is a little uncouth, and yet they still got the same thing done. But Paul Ryan didn't recognize that, the wrestling on TV is, you got to go with more theater, and you make a very convenient foil for Trump. And it worked out well for him.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no illusions here. Trump is all about tax cuts for corporations and billionaires too. But he also, serves that as a side dish to the main dish of xenophobia and deporting immigrants,
right,
and, targeting Black people and voters. So, or women voters. So, taking away abortion rights. And so, Paul Ryan only cares about that one thing of tax cuts, whereas Trump cares about a lot of other really awful things.
Let's get to news from Capitol Hill yesterday. In an early Thursday afternoon vote, the U.S. Senate, much like the right to contraception, failed to pass a bill that would help guarantee access to in vitro fertilization. Again, Senate Republicans saying, "Oh, you have nothing to worry about. There's no crisis here." Keya, there's a lot of people that think there's a crisis here.
Yeah, I mean, so IVF is, a really common form of fertility care. It's responsible for about 2% of babies being born in the U.S. And, earlier this year in Alabama, the state Supreme Court issued a ruling that pretty much caused these fertility clinics to stop care for a period of time, because the ruling essentially ruled that these embryos were equivalent to kids, real life breathing kids, and that any destruction or damage to embryos, which can happen in the IVF process, it's a normal part of it, was equivalent to murder. And so these clinics stopped care. The legislator eventually passed a bill that did not actually address that issue, but said, hey, clinics, you'll be protected if something happens. If you zoom out a little bit, this is part of a bigger effort on the right to restrict access to contraception. Senate Republicans blocked a vote to protect contraception last week, birth control at the federal level. They are obviously opposed to abortion rights. By refusing to protect access to IVF, when given the chance to, they are leaving it as a jump ball for a Trump administration to potentially restrict access. And so they can say all they want, and they are, that they don't have an issue with IVF. But when push comes to shove, they're not putting their name on a vote to actually protect access to fertility care.
Now let's come across the street to the Supreme Court, which did yesterday uphold, the ability to access mifepristone. Yeah. But because this whole thing was rooted on standing, again, I don't think nobody should take an undue amount of comfort in what the justices said yesterday, because I could see this coming in back to the court by way of, say, a second Trump term, putting the Comstock Act in place or something else. Keya, this is not a done deal in terms of, the danger to accessing safe medication for reproductive care.
Correct. In the opinion, even Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote it, wrote, quote, "It is not clear that no one else would have standing to challenge the FDA's relaxed regulation of mifepristone." So he very explicitly leaves the door open to future challenges. And the only reason this one did not fail on the merits of mifepristone, whether it should be revoked or not, it failed because the doctors who filed this lawsuit, the anti-abortion doctors, anti-abortion organizations, could not prove that they had been directly harmed by the FDA's regulation. Because these doctors did not prescribe mifepristone, they do not use mifepristone. It was essentially the equivalent of finding a plumber who was like, hey, I don't like this thing, I'm going to sue to block it because it hurt me. It didn't hurt them. And so that's why this was struck down. It was because of legal standing, not because, had the court been given an opportunity, to really strike it down, they may have. We really don't know. And so, it's a win, but all it does is preserve the status quo, for people who support reproductive rights. And there's no guarantee at all that, given the chance again on a case with a little bit more, legal finesse, that they wouldn't strike it down.
I find it odd to me that if you get as far as a U.S. Supreme Court or a state Supreme Court, and the ruling is that you don't have standing, I mean, it just seems so basic. It's almost like they should be penalized for bringing the case, or if not them, then whatever lower courts, enabled this case to go on. I mean, standing is like one of the most basic things. Do you have the ability to bring this court case or not? I just found it very awkward, but I'll talk to Jim Santelle about that. He's a former U.S. attorney. He knows these things, but I found it rather awkward. There was also a decision, though, by the Supreme Court that ruled in favor of Starbucks on a matter of, that they don't have to rehire some workers who are trying to organize some of their employees to unionize. And I only bring it up not to get into the merits of the case, but to come back to something that you said, that this court is still all about curbing the federal government's regulatory powers, yes, whether it's for the environment or for labor, or maybe in a future case for mifepristone. This is a 6-3 right-wing court that, again, not to repeat my last question for you, but is not done yet attacking the government's ability to regulate things. And they may come back yet to the FDA the way that they did yesterday to the National Labor Relations Board.
Yeah, I mean, I would never assume that this court will protect the ability of the federal government to regulate anything, unfortunately. We know that these are a lot of ideological conservative justices. Heck, we saw this week, there was audio release of Samuel Alito and his wife at an event, very much both of them leaning into, they were talking to a woman who went undercover, pretending, trying to just get them to talk naturally. And they both pretty much said, the things you would expect them to say, which are really far right, really, rooted in Christian nationalist things. And, we know Clarence Thomas is really ideologically conservative, despite, getting millions and millions of dollars in gifts from big donors. And so, yeah, I do not have any faith that this court will act in the best interest of people who need, regulations to keep them safe, to regulate the water they drink so that they don't drink poison, to keep the environment clean, to protect them from poorly made cars and really, unsafe foods. Those things are important. We have regulations for a reason, and we can only really hope right now and fight for a court that will actually understand that.
Keya Vakil is with us, national correspondent for Courier Newsroom. Let me turn to new crime stats from the FBI. I understand that there were new figures out that, again, it's been an election year thing for it feels like forever, going back to Willie Horton and 1988 and probably before that. What do we make of the latest figures put out by the FBI?
I mean, it's good news. I think, we obviously saw a surge in violent crime in 2020 and 2021, when there was a once in a century global pandemic that turned everyone's lives upside down. I don't know why anyone was surprised that the social order might have fallen apart a little bit. That's not to downplay it. Violent crime is horrific. No one should be attacked. No one should be robbed. No one should be killed, or, any of these other awful forms of crime. But, crime goes up when things are falling apart societally. And as things have stabilized a little bit, crime has come back down. And so what the FBI data shows is that, in the first quarter, there was a 15% drop in violent crime. That includes more than roughly 26% drops in both murder and rape, 18% drops in robbery, 15% drop in property crime, and 13% drop in aggravated assault. And this is relative to the first quarter of 2023. And, this is good news unambiguously, because people are safer. Less people are being attacked or hurt or killed. And in a presidential election year, it also hopefully, will mean less really, awful media coverage and of the misleading things a lot of Republicans say about Democrats regarding crime. And, we see Democrats like President Biden touting the reduction as good news, saying, every American deserves to feel safe. And so we'll see if it actually pays off. But we know, unfortunately, a lot of people live in an information environment where their perceptions of crime don't actually match up to the reality. So there is a challenge here in actually getting that information to people.
And then our last stop is from the Cardinal and Pine, our Courier Newsroom sister outlet in North Carolina. The headline is North Carolina Republicans pass a bill to let wealthy donors flood elections with cash. That's one way to put it. This just sounds like state-sanctioned money laundering when it comes to political cash in North Carolina elections, which I know we've seen everywhere since Citizens United.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm kicking myself for not using that description in the story because that's such a good one. It is essentially state-sanctioned money laundering for elections. Basically, the short version of it is this bill would allow groups like the Republican Governors Association or the Democratic Governors Association to take as much contributions from individuals and funnel it to state parties like the North Carolina Republican Party, that then could funnel it to Republican candidates like North Carolina Republican Mark Robinson, who's running for governor, without having to initially disclose where that money comes from. And so they could direct, if a donor in Michigan gives $1 million to the RGA, Republican Governors Association, but doesn't really want it to go to Robinson, he then has no control. The RGA could just then decide to direct it to the state party in North Carolina, who then directs it to Robinson. And voters don't know. They might learn eventually once campaign filings are out after the election that this has happened, but there's no way to trace that money. And so it's this really pernicious thing of flooding the state with money without knowing where it comes from.
It's just insane. And I recall being in the legislature debating campaign finance reform, and what a couple of my Republican colleagues said, and Google was still relatively new at that point, was saying we should basically have Google for campaign donations. What they wanted was no limits, no finance limits, but 100% transparency. And our response was, no, we want transparency, but you also have to have limits. Yep. Now, all these years later, I would take them up on their offer of saying, fine, you want unlimited money, which is what they've got right now, but you have to have 100% transparency, because right now we've got neither. Courier Newsroom national political correspondent Keya Vakil. Keya, thank you so much. Have a good weekend. Otherwise, we'll talk to you later.
Likewise.
We'll be back with today's history lesson next. Here up north. This, of course, would be Off Glass Houses by Billy Joel. Sometimes a fantasy. Off Glass Houses helped Billy Joel's 7th album begin a 6-week run at the top of the album charts this day in 1980. I was just deciding whether or not to share this particularly dorky moment from high school, but that's what we're here for. When I think of this song, I think of being on a school bus. We were in junior achievement, so this was an evening bus ride out to a school someplace else, and coming back, and the bus driver had the radio on. And, the song comes on and we're like, crank it. And during the chorus, you've got the whole bus going, whoa. And it's not the real thing. Whoa. And then at the end of it, I mean, it was just so dork-like and beautiful. It's one of those moments you remember. It's like, look, there are no clicks. There are no bullies. There's nothing. Just everybody was in harmony with Billy Joel.
There's only the Joel.
Joel.
It's amazing how 80s this song sounds. It sounds just like a rocket 80s song.
Oh, of course, which is why he made all the money he did and hasn't really written much for 30 years after that, cash the check. Birthdays today. Boy, we've got the alpha and omega of the political spectrum today. Robert La Follette, 20th governor of the state of Wisconsin, was born this day in 1855, died in 1925. So we've got Bob La Follette at the one end. And happy 78th birthday today, Donald Trump. I didn't know if we were going to save that tune just for Eric Hovde's, each one of his foibles. Yeah. It fits with many different people in the political spectrum. So
or you can also try it again. I got another one for you.
And happy 78th birthday, Donald Trump. Yeah, okay. Also on the list today, singer Burl Ives was born this day in 1909. A famous folk singer by and large, but he lives on every Christmas time looking like a cartoon snowman.
The cover of this record looks like a guy who wants to talk to you about jazz and poetry.
Oh, yes. And, of course, in one of those Rudolph Christmas specials, he also has Silver and Gold is the other song that you know. Boy George is 63, which always makes me... he's kind of the Keith Richards of 80s music. It's like, is Boy George still alive? Or did he, did he finally do himself in. He's put himself through a lot, shall we say.
Yes, he has.
But yeah, Boy George from Culture Club. Again, you want a morning that sounds like the 80s? I got you. Birth name, by the way, George Allen O'Dowd. And it's funny how some artists, got no problem taking their birth name, but you're not going to get, here's Time, Clock of the Heart by George O'Dowd.
And then you see what George O'Dowd is wearing. You're like, wait a minute.
Nope, it's Boy George. Totally. Yep. All right, enough of that. Let's go back to the 70s. Let's get your. This is if we're gonna do yacht rocky type tunes, I got a couple for you here.
All right.
A Song by America hit number 1 on this day in 1975.
There it is. There it is.
Little, it's not going to surprise you at all to hear that Sister Golden Hair was produced by George Martin and gets a guitar lick from George Harrison.
And I think I told you like 2 weeks ago, I didn't know this was America. I always thought it was George Harrison.
Well, and who would blame you? It's got that George Harrison, George Martin, signature on it.
Yeah.
Speaking of George Martin, he, the late George Martin, the legendary Beatles producer, was knighted by Queen Elizabeth on this day in 1996. And coincidentally, exactly 6 years later, on this day in 2002, Mick Jagger was knighted by the Queen. All right, we couldn't do a Yacht Rock Friday without telling you that the number 1 song this day in 1986 was by Patti LaBelle, her first number 1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, with a little help from, of course, Michael McDonald. Yeah, you're on the boat right now. That's right.
Oh, yeah. I'm just putting my arm out with my empty cup, getting a refill on a drink, whatever drink.
Yep. It held the top spot for 3 weeks, was also a number 1 R&B hit. Do you want to jump right ahead to Michael McDonald's part? I mean, I feel like we can't really leave Patti LaBelle and leave Michael McDonald behind. So if you want to run it up to Michael's part, that's fine. I understand.
Here we go.
Okay.
So many promises.
There he is.
Oh, this is my president.
The Second Continental Congress on this day in 1977 passed the Flag Act, adopting the Stars and Stripes, so happy Flag Day. The Continental Army was established on this day in 1775, marking the birth of the United States Armed Forces. And I want to mention that, and Roger here put a comment on Facebook for us to tell us, and the obituaries on the wires, of course, that Mark James, songwriter, who wrote hits including "Suspicious Minds" and B.J. Thomas's "Hooked on a Feeling," and co-wrote the well-covered "Always on My Mind" from Willie Nelson. Mark James has passed away at the age of 83, and I didn't have time to get you "Hooked on a Feeling," which B.J. Thomas did first, and then Blue Swede did it. Do you remember earlier in the hour, I told you about watching, I had to watch, I couldn't get the Brat Pack documentary. I couldn't get Hulu to log on. I think Gen X broke Hulu last night. So we're watching on Fox Hooked on a Feeling. We're watching Don't Forget the Lyrics.
Yeah.
And Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede was one of the songs, and it was so tough to watch one of these young contestants not know the lyrics, got them slightly wrong, and we're yelling at our TV and then realizing that's how old we are, that we can't expect people to get a 1970s song like that.
I think it shows your age that you were yelling at your television.
Oh, God, it really does, doesn't it? Okay, never mind.
No, the lyrics. Grandpa, they can't hear you. I don't care.
Jim Santelle, Mark Jacob, Dan Schumacher, all coming up here on Up North News Radio for this Friday morning. It's Flag Day. Getting started on the weekend. Back after news.
When you hold me in your arms so tight, you let me
Senor Santelle, you're here.
I am here. I'm a little bit early just because I wanted to make certain that as I sit here in a room adjacent to a dormitory that everything sounds and the connection is good.
Yes, and yes. All good.
Wonderful. Good. I will quietly observe the first wonderful segment of this hour.
I'm sure I'll bring you in before the break here, depending on how many headlines I do after the weather. So you just hang tight. We'll be back in a bit.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Pat. Good to see you, Greg.
Brittany, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Great.
So
You're gone Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week?
and then I'll be back on Thursday.
Thursday? Okie dokie. Thanks.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Thank you, Don Rue. Good morning. Welcome back to Up North News Radio on Abashedly, Wisconsin, brought to you by Courier Newsroom and carried by our friends on the Civic Media Radio Network, live from Chippewa Falls. I'm Pat Brightlow. It is 7:06. Nice to have you here on this Friday morning, June the 14th. Coming up this hour, we continue with our regular amazing stable of Friday workhorses. They include former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle on all manner of legal things we're going to ask him about. Live from Eau Claire, by the way, where he's attending Badger Boys State. We'll talk to Dan Schumacher about sports. We will talk to Mark Jacob about media coverage of the week's big stories, including his new column that divides political media into three distinct categories: the ruthless, the truthless, and the toothless. So stick around for all of that. You can join us along the way at 855-75-CIVIC, 855-75-CIVIC. You can also use that Civic Media app. In fact, let's get you using it right now. One last time here on Up North News Radio, but again throughout the course of the day today, you can text an hourly keyword to be entered in the Scotty Summer Text to Win contest. It's a statewide contest where everybody's got a chance to win a wonderful staycation grand prize. There's hourly prizes, there's daily prizes, just so much to get entered in and potentially win. The Brewers tickets would be fantastic, great club seats. So here we go. One more time. This hour's keyword is cheese. Cheese. Text cheese using the Civic Media app our way, and you are entered into the contest. Again, different keywords each hour. It's 7, 9, 11, 1, 3, 5. So stay tuned throughout the day for each hour's keyword and get your chance to win. You've got to text cheese our way before 8 o'clock, and then you'll be entered to win. Let's see. We've got Rob from Tigerton is weighing in with stuff for Brittany Merlot, and Greg Bach, who's out in Waukesha. Meteorologist Brittany Merlot is here as well. Let's see. From Rob, good morning from Tigerton. Yesterday, going to work mowing lawns in Tigerton, I saw a black bear running across the cornfield. There have been bears spotted in Shawano County, especially in Shawano, where a bear was spotted by the Shawano Library. The bears are very smart in Shawano and know to go to the library. Good on them. And he also says he learned about being kind from his mom. She told me instead of saying bad things about people, to say nice compliments because you can put smiles on yourself and the other person. It's in memory of my mom. Well, okay, now we get fine. Brittany, you do excellent forecasts, and we love hearing your voice every day. Look, see, we put a smile on her face just like that.
We're cheesing, like the keyword cheese, right?
That's right. That's exactly it. So, welcome to summer. This is a very wonderful, typical summer morning here up on Lake Wissota. How are things looking around the state today?
Oh, beautiful today. My gosh, we're going to be anywhere from the mid 70s up north to the low 80s down south. Mostly sunny skies and just comfortable temperatures, not much humidity at all. In fact, the only downfall today is by the afternoon, winds are going to shift out of the northeast, and that's going to give a little lake breeze. So towns by Lake Michigan, you may feel some upper 60s by later on this afternoon. Otherwise, tomorrow starts off pretty too. We are looking at partly cloudy skies, temperatures still comfortable out there, anywhere from the mid 70s. Further north, you'll be low 70s. It'll start to get breezy by late morning and clouds start to increase as showers push in from the southwest. This is along the warm front that's going to be moving into the state. So we are looking at rain widespread for a good chunk of Saturday evening and then into Sunday morning. Now, some heavy rain is definitely pegged to fall into central Wisconsin. And actually, Pat, it looks like it's somewhere between you and I, anywhere between 2 to 3 inches of rainfall. And that looks mainly overnight Saturday and into Sunday morning. And then as we go into Sunday night, where this front lines up, we could see some more heavy rainfall as well. Now, for Father's Day, everybody's wondering, can we get outside? What's the weather going to be like? Well, rain in the morning, partly cloudy skies in the afternoon. It's going to get hot and it's going to get humid. I'm talking upper 80s to low 90s with dew points in the mid 70s. It's going to be feeling so sticky, oppressive, just claustrophobic, heavy feeling. And that's going to stick with us the entire week next week. So summer weather is really here. Upper 80s to low 90s next week. It all starts on Sunday. So make sure that AC is working, your fans are good to go, and you have ways to cool down. Because
that's fine. Dad will be wearing the Hawaiian shirt or whatever, the typical dad shirt is, and you'll need it on something like that. Did you bring anything for show and tell on this Coffee Cup Friday?
You betcha.
Oh, look at that. You betcha, she says. What do we got there?
So this one has all the currents of the ocean, and it'll tell you if they're shallow or if they're deep and which way they're going. And
Brittany's mug makes us smarter.
I'm a nerd.
Aw.
You are weathering. I switched coffee cups because I brought 2 today.
I was going to say, you brought 2 coffee cups now. What's that one?
This one is from a TV show that it's your show, so you can pronounce the title of it, but I'm afraid to because I don't want to get hit with the FCC. But it's David Rose from a TV show. Pat, you say it.
The TV show would be Schitt's Creek. It's okay to say it, but go ahead.
I don't know, but
okay.
it's a. I have 2 David Rose coffee mugs at home, and this one just says, "I'm trying very hard not to connect with people right now."
I love that.
you can't help but still a good mug just the same.
No.
All right. Thank you, Brittany. Have a great weekend.
You too.
You can sign up for our daily newsletter over at UpNorthNewsWI.com. Again, UpNorthNewsWI.com. Don't forget the WI when you sign up for the newsletter. We'd love to have you there as a subscriber. All you got to do is click newsletter in the top banner. Today, there's a story that has, we've noticed these billboards primarily in northeast Wisconsin, rural parts of the state, similar signs in North Carolina and Georgia. It's just a photo of former President Donald Trump and convicted sex offender, the late Jeffrey Epstein. And they're not technically political billboards, and so we don't know who funded them, but they are going up and certainly designed to have some kind of an impact. So that story's in our newsletter. Everything you need to know about blood donation, because blood supplies run low in the summer and donors are needed more than ever. Also, there's another list of best supper clubs out there, and today's newsletter talks about 3 clubs in the Northwoods to put on your bucket list. And what waterfalls in Wisconsin can you camp near? So all of that and more in the daily newsletter. Sign up for it over at UpNorthNewsWI.com. And if you want to reach the show here, again, 855-75-CIVIC. Jane Matinaire and Todd Alba have their shows on the road. Yesterday, I joined them in Eau Claire. And today I'll join them later in Amory. Jane's show from 10 to noon, Todd's show from noon to 2. And at one point, one of our regular callers called into the show and said, well, Pat, I'm very disappointed that you don't take calls anymore. And I was just like, well, that's not true. And but I did explain one of my two things about the show that I thought I would explain here again. First off, I think regular listeners probably know that we have very set breaks. Sometimes you hear us rushing because we're rushing the clock. And so we're going to break pretty much on the nines, 7:19, 7:29, and 7:49. And it's really something people will call in at 7:18 or 7:28. And I could rush you and say, hey, you got to make your point in 10 seconds. But typically I won't because I don't want to rush you. But also because we're an early morning show, sometimes what's in the next segment might be pre-taped. For example, Keya Vakil's appearances, because he's in Los Angeles, and we don't want to ask him to be on live at 4:30 Pacific time. So then we can't take the call into the next segment either. So we apologize if we can't get you on right away, but we do appreciate if you're willing to hold until there's a segment where we can get you on, but definitely do want you to call in at 855-75-CIVIC, or I love the fact that you can text at that same number, 855-75-CIVIC, and send a text like Tony's putting up on not Facebook, on YouTube right now. All the cool kids text. Well, fine, Tony. Yeah, all the cool kids text, but did you text us that message? No, you put it on YouTube because you're watching the show there. On the Up North News YouTube page, you can send us a message there. On the Up North News or the Civic Media Facebook pages, you can put a comment there, and we'll put it on screen, and we'll see it that way as well. So did not want you to think your input is not welcome. It very much is. On the national calendar today, Mr. Bach, it is a very short one besides Flag Day. It is, of course, Flag Day, but it's also Strawberry Shortcake Day, which we made some last weekend because we got too many strawberries, and so we picked up some shortcake, and oh, that was so good. And it's National Bourbon Day. So I'm checking out now for the rest of the day, because if there's one day that is a holiday for me, it would be National Bourbon Day. So I have to go increase.
In Pat's coffee cup? It's booze.
No. There's no bourbon in today's UW Eau Claire alumni mug.
I think it's interesting though too. It's former President Donald Trump's birthday today,
78. Yes,
and it's also Flag Day, and he just loves hugging flags. So I feel like it's the perfect marriage of weird and
patriotic, all in one. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So yeah, it's a good day to fly the flag, and it's a good day not to fly the flag upside down, kids. There really is not a good excuse to do that, especially if you're a Supreme Court justice or their wife. Former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle is joining us just a little bit early because we've got the usual legal questions and issues that we're going to talk about. James, good morning to you.
Pat, always a pleasure to be with you, as you indicated today, from the campus of the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. What a great pleasure it is to be here.
Well, you're there for Badger Boy State, so I thought I would take this, 60 seconds before we jump into the legal stuff, and tell us what is Badger Boy State, in a concise manner, and what are you doing there?
Absolutely. This is the Wisconsin American Legion, the largest veterans group in the United States of America, every year for about almost the past 100 years, somewhere around 89, 90 years or so. Wisconsin American Legion has brought together both boys and girls, 2 different presentations during the course of the summertime. Juniors in high school going to their senior year. It's all about civics this week. We play government, we play municipal government, county government, state government, elections, campaigning. And today, the Badger Boy State Supreme Court is in session about an hour and a half, and working with them to decide cases here as a part of this wonderful civics education initiative by the American Legion.
It's so amazingly enjoyable. It's the kind of stuff that I did. I was going to say nerdly, and then people are going to get offended, but no, it's good to put that brain to work on things that are important related to civics. So thank you for working on that. Jim's going to stand by, and then we're going to talk about some big Supreme Court rulings and other matters in the news coming up next, wherever you're listening on this Friday morning. When you're here, you're up north. We'll be right back.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.
Back with Jim Santelle in just a moment. First, a reminder, Brewers were off yesterday. They start a 3-game series at home against the Cincinnati Reds. You can catch the pregame starting at 6:35 on Civic Media stations in Richland Center, Racine, Kenosha, Park Falls, and Oshkosh. Amicus, or Amicus, depending on your potato, tomato preference, can be heard live Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 on Civic Media stations around Wisconsin. Play it back on Sunday morning as well. The man behind it all is former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle, and he returns with us now where he's helping out at Badger Boy State at UW-Eau Claire. And, of course, Jim, we're going to start by talking about Hunter Biden. No, we're not. No, if we might make time for Hunter Biden, but more likely than not, we're going to start first with the mifepristone ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm not going to get into the notion that, they didn't strike down mifepristone access. The question I have for you is the one about what's called standing. Do you even have the standing to come into court and bring the suit? And that is what the Supremes yesterday ruled on, not the merits of mifepristone, not the merits of whether the FDA should exist or not. They said that the parties here, as you have explained to us previously, don't have standing because they can't show direct harm from this. So here's my question. Standing sounds like one of the most basic things. And so it seems if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court and they have to say there's no standing, it seems like such a dunk on the lower courts that should have taken care of this. Do judges at lower levels, do they have to go sit in a corner or something if they can't, figure out standing before it gets to the Supreme Court?
It certainly does sound as if there should be some remedy or some response to those lower courts who apparently, as we learned yesterday, as you've just rightly indicated, Pat, got it wrong on this very threshold issue. Standing, as you just said, got to be able to show in all cases, all civil cases, I've been harmed in some cognizable, some material, some knowable way. And here, yesterday, the Supreme Court says, you know what? These medical doctors and these associations affiliated with them just haven't shown that they have suffered a particular kind of damage. Now, the issue has certainly been raised at the lower courts, so that's why maybe we'll give it a little bit of a break here. But again, the Supreme Court saying, wait a minute, we don't have to get to the merits. All of you lower courts did get it wrong when you address this issue. We're straightening all this out to say we got the wrong plaintiffs in this case. Fascinating decision on standing. And also, when you get to the substance, you got it just right. Mifepristone still approved then by the FDA. But plainly, the members of the Supreme Court, nobody wants to undermine the FDA. That was clear from the oral argument. And yet you've got at least 5-6 members of the Supreme Court who also don't want to go on record saying mifepristone. an abortion drug is okay. And so this is punting. This is not getting to the main issue, and it's preserving the capacity to bring this up again when so-called the right plaintiffs get to the Supreme Court.
The right plaintiffs, and also, they know, political animals that they are, that a ruling striking down mifepristone access would be used as a political issue between now and November. So there's nothing at all that says next year, and let's say especially if Donald Trump wins, and if Congress remains in Republican hands, that they wouldn't then take this up, because the 6 conservative justices, are still very much going after, the regulatory state in this country, the thing that keeps our water clean, keeps our drugs safe. And I know this to be true, Jim, I think, because of the other issue they ruled on yesterday, dealing with Starbucks workers who want to unionize. The National Labor Relations Board took some action, and the Supreme Court basically, said, no, we're siding with Starbucks rather than the National Labor Relations Board. So it's not the FDA this time, it's not the EPA this time, but the Supreme Court is still very much just itching to dismantle parts of the federal government that we entrust to keep us safe.
Right, absolutely. And again, in this case, this is the Starbucks NLRB versus McKenna is the formal name of it, basically saying that the lower courts misapplied a judicial standard. They re-articulated a 4-part standard, but the larger issue is, again, Pat, precisely what you just identified. There has been for a long time, and especially in this term, what I would describe as a judicial attack on the so-called administrative state. It doesn't exist. It's this notion that we should trust people who are experts, who are agency people all of their lives, who make these important decisions. They're not to be trusted. We don't know who they are, and therefore let's shut them down. This case, again, is in that area. Recognize that there are at least 2 other cases we're still waiting to hear from, one of them involving the SEC, whether the Supreme Court will permit that agency to go ahead, at least as it was constituted, in 1920 or so, an attack on the SEC. And there's a big case called Loper Bright Enterprises. It also focuses upon whether or not an agency's determination about the interpretation of a law should be upheld when the statute itself is perhaps a bit ambiguous. For 40 years in a case called Chevron, the Supreme Court and other lower courts have said, we will defer to agency experts because they know what they're talking about. This issue that you just identified here in Starbucks, in another case, SEC versus Jarchese, Loper Bright, all these cases are inside the Supreme Court questioning, again, 40 years of precedent, 40 years of tradition in our country that says, you know what, absent a decision of an agency being unreasonable, we will defer to that because they know better. The mifepristone case is also in that category, of course, went in the opposite direction, but we're by no means done with this issue.
No, not at all. And again, it's people say, well, so what? So what is it? You're opening the door to the politicization of issues, which we also see at the Wisconsin legislature level, where Republicans want to micromanage how funds are spent for PFAS cleanup rather than letting the experts at the Department of Natural Resources handle that. And again, in a kinder, gentler time, we trusted the experts, and now we've got what I would argue is a corporate or commerce class in our legislative bodies saying, oh no, we should let our elected officials do it, which is a way of saying we should let the elected officials who are getting campaign donations from big industry, we should let them make the rules instead. And that would not be a good thing for our political system, for our agency system, for our safety, but for our legal system as well, I would argue.
Right. And it has been the practice, again, for 250 years almost, that legislatures pass laws. And the legislative language prescribes broad concepts, right? They can't possibly address every single case. And so you go to the agencies and say, here's the standard, here are the principles to apply. You know what you're doing. You do this. As you just indicated, Pat, this trend in the opposite direction turns all of our legislators into specific decision makers on fact-specific matters. You don't want that. Not only does it slow down government, again, it places responsibility in the hands of people who, with due respect, are not experts in these areas, I would go so far as to say they don't know what they're talking about. And it really is a great concern beyond all of those issues, legislative and the Loper Bright, the Jarchese case. Recognize that what happens in those other cases could apply to all kinds of other federal agencies. Oh, for example, the Social Security Administration,
Right.
HUD, HHS. How many agencies are we engaged with every single day? And we've got to rely upon those expertise.
The ramifications are endless. And by the way, we didn't get into Hunter Biden because we've made this point already. For Republicans who are cheering that Hunter Biden was convicted, congratulations. You're now in favor of universal background checks and gun registries. Way to play yourself. Jim Santelle will have more on Amicus 9 a.m. tomorrow across the Civic Media Radio Network. Thank you, sir.
Pat, happy Flag Day to you and your listeners.
Thank you very much. Mark Jacob is next. You're up north. And we are clear. James, thank you again.
Pat, always a pleasure. I'm so glad this worked out. I'm looking at beautiful Eau Claire campus here, and sun is shining, and 16-year-olds are running around wildly. So bring that in here.
As they've always been. It's a beautiful sight. Right. All right, man. Have a good weekend. Safe travels.
You take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Morning, Mark.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thanks. We basically just promoted nothing but your column, so we'll get into a lot of what is ruthless, truthless, and toothless today.
Great. Okay.
For starters.
Yeah. I guess I assume you've talked plenty about the Milwaukee horrible city stuff. Right?
We did last week. We haven't really touched on it this hour at all, so that'll be either first or second as well. So.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? I mean
just the fact that they're unable to keep their story straight, you know?
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, he didn't say it. No, he meant this. No, he meant that. Like,
and then he admits saying it, and then the RNC says he said it, but Mike Johnson didn't hear it, and he was sitting right next to him. He says, I mean, it's like
there's no trust. There's no trust.
Well, there's no. I mean, they lie. It's a policy to lie. It's not just that they occasionally lie. It's their whole strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh boy, let's see.
It's pretty wacky.
It is. I know.
Are you going to do anything special for the convention? Are you?
No. For the Milwaukee one.
Yeah.
No, I've got a reporter in Milwaukee, but I honestly believe, and I've said this on air. I think that all of this back and forth about the protest zone and allowing guns in it, and frankly, the comments about crime is I would not be surprised that there are people who are going to want to instigate trouble there. Right. And I'm not going to put my reporter in that kind of position. We don't need to be inside that area to cover it. So we'll let other people get the access, and we'll just kind of report from the 10,000 foot level.
Well, for decades, nothing has happened at conventions.
Right.
I mean, I covered the St. Paul one, the Sarah Palin one.
Yes.
And, when what I was doing was sitting, I didn't have floor access. So I was sitting about 100 feet from the convention hall watching television. That's what I was doing. So that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. But
it's an infomercial for the parties.
Yeah, and look, it's got its role. I was a delegate to the Denver one in 2008, but we should never mistake it for what it used to be. I mean, we actually talked 2 days ago about the Chicago one in 1920, where an AP reporter coined the phrase "smoke-filled rooms." It's like, oh, that's where that term came from. But I don't know that we're going to see 20 ballots, to pick a nominee anymore.
No. That's all set up.
Yeah. Yep. Unfortunately. So we got enough to go on here. So let me tuck you away for another 90 seconds here, and I'll be right back. All right, one more from the Yacht Rock Library before we turn things over to the Grateful Dead in about 15, 20 minutes here. Again, the Scotty Summer Text to Win contest. The keyword for this hour is cheese. Text that in using the Civic Media app before 8 o'clock, and you will be in the running for a random drawing for some great prizes, hourly, daily, and a grand prize staycation as well. All right, Mark Jacob is with us now. You can get his newsletter at stopthepresses.news. He's also got a video series with Stephen Beschloss, and this time around, we're going to talk about the 3 distinct categories of political media. That's what he's got in his latest Stop the Presses newsletter. Mark, good morning. How are you?
Doing great.
All right. I love this headline. Today's media, the ruthless, the truthless, and the toothless. And as I've said a couple times already today, you'd think I'd be most upset about the truthless. No, it is definitely about the toothless, and we'll get to them last. Let's go with the ruthless and the truthless first, and what you wrote about, the pros and cons of those outfits.
Yeah, well, these are the 3 categories of people who are, and media outlets that are either consciously and purposely causing damage to our democracy, or are just don't care. They're too busy worrying about their own careers, and they're just going to let the liars lie. So the ruthless, it's pretty easy to see those people, such as Rupert Murdoch. And I talk about how Rupert Murdoch is pretty much the worst thing that's ever happened to American democracy. That if democracy dies, the autopsy report will list him as the primary cause of death. And that's because, you've seen Fox News and increasingly, lying about stuff. His New York Post is just terrible. They did something, Pat, yesterday where they took a Biden clip from Europe and they took it totally out of context to make it seem as if he was wandering off from the group when he was actually turning it and talking to somebody who had just done a demonstration. And so they cut out that person, took it out of context, just to make it look, well, Biden's wandering off. No, it's just a lie by the New York Post, picked up by right-wing media. So Pat, these people they're not accidentally doing this. They are ruthless. And I looked up the definition of ruthless to make sure I had it right. And it's people who cause harm and don't care. They don't care that they're harming people. And that's what these people are. And the funny thing in this newsletter, well, let me rant about Murdoch just a little bit longer.
Sure.
I feel like, you look at, he owns the Wall Street Journal, and Wall Street Journal was the one that did that incredibly terrible report on Joe Biden, in which the main named person, saying that, well, Biden's slipping, was Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy, one of the biggest liars in America, and somebody who clearly has an axe to grind and wants Biden to fail. So that's the main named person, and it's come out since then that a lot of Democrats talked to the Wall Street Journal for the story, and they just weren't quoted. I mean, so it was just a hit piece. It's a Murdoch hit piece. Well, and then there's another angle with Murdoch. Murdoch is a former employer of Will Lewis, the guy at the Washington Post, who's now publisher of the Washington Post, and was involved in the attempted cover-up of Murdoch's horrible phone hacking scandal. You remember that, Pat?
Yeah.
That's where they were hacking into the phones of celebrities and royals, to write stories. I mean, just not only illegal, but just reprehensible and unethical. And Lewis was not involved in that. He came in later, and he's being accused of being involved in the cover-up. And because a lot of emails just suddenly disappeared, that kind of stuff.
And this is not just a national thing. This is a local thing, which takes us to the other example that you give, which is Sinclair Broadcasting, which owns stations, TV stations in Wisconsin and across the country, which also comes from an extreme ideological point of view, to the point where they too will purposefully mislead their viewers.
Yeah, I know, it's so funny. I wrote this newsletter before the latest Sinclair thing. And I'm glad I included Sinclair, because they did what they did is they took that stupid Wall Street Journal story and they hyped it up, and they had their local anchors read the intro to it, so that it created this kind of sense of, well, it's your local trusted person telling you that Biden's slipping. And this is the insidious thing about Sinclair. They own 185 stations all over the country. And studies have shown that local news is much more trustworthy than national news now. So this is their way to sneak in kind of horrible messages, using people who are supposedly trustworthy, and the people are going to tell you when a thunderstorm's coming to hit you, so that you have to trust them. So so those are the what I would call the main ruthless people I mentioned in the piece were Murdoch gang and Sinclair.
So,
And
they're the ones that are overt in their activity. And then your next category, the truthless, is related, but it's less about ideology and more about I'll say whatever it takes to be famous.
Right. I mean, because Jesse Waters, I focus on him at Fox News because he's just awful. And I don't think Jesse Waters cares. I don't think he wants conservative values. He wants a balanced budget. Jesse Waters doesn't care if there's a balanced budget. He cares if his own personal budget is really, really unbalanced because he's got a lot of money. I mean, it's what I call not ideologues, but careerists. These are people who are on the air just to con the rubes, is the way I put it, to tell gullible people lies. And and Jesse Waters, is it's so insidious. He's like, his main campaign lately has been to undermine our judicial system by talking about how prejudiced the jurors are, and like the Trump jurors, he said that they were against Trump because they're teachers, they watch CNN, and they like to dance. Because this came up in the the interviews with jurors. They do. Oh, and they like to dance. Well, they're probably against Trump. I don't know why Trump dances on stage. So,
yeah.
But so he just does this, and then he does this crap with crime. And as you've pointed out, crime is down. Crime is down.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know listening to people like him.
No.
There's also Maria Bartiromo is another one. You get into Chris Cuomo. Again, Kathleen Parker, some other newspaper columnists, who just can't help but be wrong all the time.
Right.
But they're writing things that they want to hear. Now we get to the toothless, and these are the ones who. Well, how do you describe them?
Well, these are people who are wasting their power. These are people who have great influence in media. They could be confronting the liars. They could be, they could be real guardians of truth. But instead, they're looking for their own personal advantage. I cite a few, like I cite Ben Smith, who's started the Semaphore news outlet, and in the debut of Semaphore a couple years ago, the first guest they had was Tucker Carlson. So hey, we're a news outlet, so we're gonna feature Tucker Carlson. So so obviously they did that to get attention. They know Tucker Carlson's a liar, but it didn't matter to them. They were doing it for attention, Pat. And this is what I'm talking about. These are people who they're toothless because they have the ability to bite hard and hurt people who lie. They have the ability to be ferocious guardians of the truth in our news media. But at the same time, they're not. They're just kind of going along. And, you also have Kristen Welker and the Meet the Press stuff where she invited Trump on to lie on her debut episode. So,
and of course, we've talked about the New York Times ad nauseum. But the other angle on that I wanted to throw in that makes them toothless is not just the things they choose to play up, but the things they choose to downplay. For example, this week there was a headline. I'll bet 9 out of 10 people listening haven't heard that the main shipping lane in the Baltimore harbor is open.
Right.
That's a big deal. You're not going to hear about it. You don't hear anything about how many records Wall Street set this week. You're hearing nothing about the Bob Menendez, the corruption trial of a sitting United States senator, which is leaps and bounds more important than Hunter Biden. The crime stats that are plummeting, the inflation numbers that are leveling off, and it's those conscious choices as well to downplay certain stories that also renders them toothless, it seems.
Well, yes, and that to me is I've written about this before because there's a tendency in news media to just focus on the negative, and so competence always gets underappreciated. You look at the infrastructure bill. Trump couldn't pass an infrastructure bill. Biden passed it. But you're a motorist and you're driving to work and all this other stuff, and you don't hit a pothole and you don't have a flat tire. Well, what are you thinking? You're not thinking, well, I really like Joe Biden because I didn't hit a pothole today. You're not thinking about that. That's why it's really important for the news media to remind you of that, to tell you, because that's an important thing. and the bridge stuff is part of it. Same thing happened. Listen, there was a big highway collapse in Philadelphia, wasn't there, a while back, and that got fixed really fast because the Pennsylvania governor is a Democrat and actually gave a damn, and it was Shapiro, and he's very competent. Competence is undervalued right now. The Hollywood kind of politics of Hollywood kind of showiness is overvalued.
The show is the important part, and something that I mentioned a couple days back, and I see Jennifer Schulte just wrote about it, wrote a column over at Heartland Signal about it. I asked my listeners the other day, read a transcript of Donald Trump's rallies. Don't look at a clip here and there. Don't even watch the video. Read the transcript and tell me what you think, about the packaging of a video rally versus the substance of what he's actually saying, which isn't much. There's a whole lot of gibberish in there.
A whole lot of craziness. And that's, again, Pat, a story that they're not writing. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're writing, Biden might be old, but they're not writing the story of Trump. Every time he has a public appearance, shows that he's out of his mind. He's out of his damn mind. And, he's like ranting about Hannibal Lecter. He's ranting about sharks.
Sharks and electric boats.
Right. I mean, it's crazy stuff. And, and that's what they're writing about. And I tweeted this morning, I was just thinking about it, that mainstream media is obsessed with, first ladies. They always have been obsessed with first ladies. Where's the story about why Melania won't have anything to do with Trump? Where's that story? I haven't seen that story. Have you seen that story?
No, I have not.
And you would think that she would have a lot of inside information of Trump's, the value of being around Trump. And if she's actively avoiding him, there's probably a pretty good reason.
No, instead there was, why is Jill Biden showing up at the courtroom every day?
Right.
Always looking for that negative lens. I want to end with Donald Trump's comment yesterday about Milwaukee being a horrible city. But rather than, whether he said it or didn't say it, and of course, to hear Republicans from Wisconsin, they can't get on the right story. We've heard 3 or 4 different interpretations of what he meant. But I do want to zero in on this part of it, and that is, this was first reported by Punchbowl News. Jake Sherman put something out that Trump said it. And so some of the blowback has been about, basically anonymous sources and saying, well, how do we know he said it? We haven't got confirmation that he said it. And yet everybody runs with it anyway. And I think if you could talk for a moment about why, whether it's a Punchbowl News or if it could have been a Washington Post or New York Times reporter or somebody going with it first. I mean, there are some things where you don't necessarily have the time or the wherewithal to find a second person in the room of this private meeting to get confirmation.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's always a tough one when you use an anonymous source. But I mean, here you have Trump going back to Capitol Hill and meeting with the Republicans in Congress. It's a closed meeting. It could have been an open meeting. I mean, if they didn't have anything to hide, they could have had an open meeting and just had Trump talk to the members of Congress, and the news media could have just written it down and recorded it. But they didn't want that because they had things to hide. And so Jake Sherman, pretty well sourced, that somebody in the room is like texting him and saying, here's what he said, here's what he said. Do you go with it? I mean, I think you go with it because it has a high level of credibility, because it's the way Trump operates. I mean, he's been demonizing American cities, the whole time he's been in politics. And
it's not out of character. That's the thing, No,
and the thing is, Pat, the RNC confirmed it. Trump later confirmed it.
Yes.
Mike Johnson, our House Speaker, closely in line to be head of the country someday, he said, well, I was sitting right next to him and I didn't hear it. Well, maybe you weren't listening, Mike, because a lot of other people did hear it.
Or maybe, again, the willingness to simply lie to reporters is, again, I mean, it's not new, but it's at a level now that just makes it so hard to trust certain people in elected positions. And they try to pass it off as lack of trust in, the journalists who are just trying to get a story out. Mark Jacob, thank you as always. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right. And when we come back, we'll talk to Dan Schumacher. We'll get the weekend started. We'll talk a little sports and more after this. You're Up North. All right, we are clear. Mr. Schumacher, how are you?
Good.
All right.
Good
Had a
morning,
shitty night
Dan.
last
How you
night.
doing, buddy?
Good, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So I haven't been on that boat for 3 weeks. I come home last night, gonna jump in the boat and enjoy the beautiful weather last night. Dead battery.
Oh, yeah, it happens.
Womp, womp.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was pissed.
Yeah. Understandably.
Yeah.
But-
But I borrowed Art's charger, so it's charging right now. And then
Okay.
I've also bought one of those almost like a jump starter.
Yes. Yeah, I've got one of those. Yeah.
So
Okay. You'll be out there.
yeah, I'll be giving it a try here in an hour.
All right. Sounds perfect. All right.
Driving that train, high cocaine. Casey Jones, you better watch your speed.
On this day in 1970, the Grateful Dead released their fourth studio album, Working Man's Dead. It had some shorter songs than their previous albums, like Casey Jones, making their music more accessible. At least that's what Aaron Zomers told me when he wrote this last year for this day in history. So can I get some confirmation on this?
Yeah, they owed the record company a lot of money from their previous albums because they're just too long of songs. They weren't getting radio play. And so they came in with this Western style sound, country music almost sound, Bakersfield type sound, as they called it, in California. And shorter songs that were playable.
Love it. I love this version I love this era, like the countryified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could listen to it all day.
Dan, I'd normally start by talking about the Brewers. They did not play yesterday. They start a series in Cincinnati. So I'm going to take that time that I would have talked about the Brewers, and I'm going to turn things back over to Greg because we had so much on our to-do list today that I neglected, as I often do on Fridays, to ask what's happening over at the Laughing Tap.
Laughing Tap, we got 3 shows, 1 tonight, 2 tomorrow, 7:30 tonight, 7:30 and 10 tomorrow. Jeannie Dugan, Chicago comedy stalwart, wonderful comic. She's going to be doing 3 shows here at the Laughing Tap. You can get your tickets at laughingtap.com. No drink minimums, $22 online, $25 at the door. It's going to be a great time. You'll see my face. So I'm sorry, but it's also going to be great. It's going to be a fun time. Dan, Pat, you guys should come down and see a show sometime.
I was just going to say, Dan, we have to stop talking about this.
Yeah, we have to stop
we
talking
talk about it all the time. Now, I'm going up to Amory for the shows today. Matt and Aaron on air at 10 a.m. Todd Alba will have his show from noon to 2. Then I'm driving back from Amory. And by the time I get to the Mallard at some point later on, we're just going to grab a bar napkin. And we're going to start looking at dates and figure out when the heck we can finally get down and see Greg and see the folks at the Laughing Tap.
Right on.
That'd be great.
Right on.
Okay.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. And then we're going to send a note to Greg, and he's going to text back. No, I'm gone that weekend. No, that's just not going to work out, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry. I did not get a chance. You did invite us to join you yesterday. A little late getting back from things, so didn't go down to my pontoon. Did you get out on your boat yesterday? He said,
No.
knowing the answer already.
No, dead battery. It's
Yeah.
charging right now. I haven't used the boat in 3 weeks, but I kind of got a concern because the button that was left on was the bilge.
Oh,
So-
okay.
And I don't know if that burns out the bilge by being on that much, but
Does
I
it
don't know.
does it
I'm
have an
gonna find
automatic
out-
shut
I'm
off
gonna find out
though?
in a while.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, well, yeah, I guess I'll hear a tale from you one way or the other a little bit later on here. I heard this morning that your Cubs, I believe, have lost 8 of their last 9 home series, something like that, or 8 of their series
I think-
overall.
I think our mutual
what's-
friend lost his mind on Twitter last night. Bob Gallagher was losing his mind over
Oh
it.
no!
Yeah, he's just throwing counsel underneath the bus, and a lot of Chicago people are. They're wondering what they got for that kind of money.
I do know that, yeah, he had mentioned earlier whether we would take Greg Counsell back. And the answer is no, we would not. Here. Here it is. I'm finding some of these now. Oh wait, these are from. Oh my God, he's got a whole string of them. It's like every time the Cubs lose. Here's one. Cubs lucky to win 65 games. Offense is pathetic. Counsel, what an awful hire. 40 million, what a heist. Hoyer, brutal. Who's Hoyer?
Hoyer's the president of the Cubs.
Oh, okay. Okay. The Cubs officially quit under Counsel, he writes 4 days later. No leadership from the top down. What a bad team. 2 days after that, Craig Counsell gives up on games. It's his trademark. Must save the bullpen. Cubs will be lucky to win 65 games this year. An anemic hitting team. Zero grit on the north side, whereas the Brewers are all grit. And then a day after that,
I told you he's going nuts.
Hoyer, Counsell 2024. What a bust. Bad from top down. Hoyer can't evaluate. Counsell can't manage. Position players can't hit. A bad franchise that lacks any direction. And then 5 days after that, thanks to horrible leadership from the Cubs, Counsell and Hoyer, I no longer care about baseball. These two obviously don't care, which is what he says for, about a week. And then he'll be back. And in fact, he posted yesterday about Hoyer in the Cubs bullpen. Bob, buddy.
Bob,
I love you. Yeah, you got to be good to you. This is Bob. Bob Gallagher is one of the morning anchor at Channel 13. He was a sports director during all of my time there, and lives and breathes the Bears and the Cubs. But it also, of course, he's lived in Wisconsin for way more than half his life. Right. He covers the Packers and Badgers better than anybody, but he still keeps that little hometown sense of hope, and it's killing him. It's killing my brother Bob. Yeah. Come on, Bobby.
Hey, two things on my end.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to talk to you about. One, did you see the video of the speech by Tom Brady?
No, I did not. I thought maybe you were going to mention Roger Federer. We played some of the Roger Federer one the other day. That was one of the best addresses. All I saw from the Tom Brady one was the very beginning. I saw a clip someplace where he says, I'm Tom Brady and I'm a Patriot. Yes. And he got to a big applause, of course, at the stadium there in Foxborough, Massachusetts. So good on him for being inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. What else? What other impression did you get?
Just a great messaging. It was from the heart. It wasn't scripted. You could tell. He talked about that life is hard, and it doesn't matter if you're Tom Brady or anybody. That life is hard, and you're going to have, hills to climb and a journey to have. And it was pretty impressive. I'd encourage anybody that wants to get a lift on a Friday going into the weekend and listen to that speech. It's pretty inspiring. And it's right on.
Does he include anything about not unretiring and maybe going and learning your children's names first or anything like that? No, he doesn't. Okay,
nothing like that.
Okay, just making sure.
But the other one is, how about Aaron Rodgers?
How about Aaron Rodgers?
How about him?
What am I missing about Aaron now?
Oh, the big controversy. He skipped OTAs this week because he had a prior engagement that it's a mystery on what he's actually doing, and everybody's is he back in a cave and doing psychedelics?
He had to be on a podcast.
Something he said he had to do, and he's getting fined for it. And the coach.
Well, the fine was like $40,000, which is the change that's on his nightstand. So
he's such a drama queen, man. He goes to a new team, and it's a drama. It's drama.
You know who showed up to OTA? Jordan Love, happily.
Yeah.
See, I like that. You're going to miss this next week, as I was looking at some of the things we'll talk about next week. Next Tuesday is National Splurge Day. So on Tuesday, I'm going to be asking, what little luxuries do you add to your life now, or which big ones would you get if you could really splurge? So if I told you, just quickly, word association, you get to splurge on something, what'd be the next thing?
Oh, I know what I'd buy. I'd buy one of those massive Mercedes living out of a van type world.
There we go.
I would go on the road.
You'd go on the road and you'd follow anything Grateful Dead related.
I would see as much live music around the country as I possibly could and live in a van and down by the river.
Well, trust me, I can see you living in a van. I don't know if it'll be a Mercedes, but one way or the other. All right, buddy, I'll talk to you a little later on.
See you guys. See you, Greg.
All right. Greg's with Matt and Air on Air, and Jane will be in Amory coming up a couple of hours from now. Thanks to all of you for being part of this. Have a wonderful weekend. Megan Rowe from Opportunity, Wisconsin joins us on Monday morning. Thanks for being here up north. See you Monday morning.